Okay, now for the fun stuff, determining our media query breakpoints. Now, of course, I have a web page opened up here in front of me. I'm going to get to this in just a second. Before I get to this web page, I want to mention a couple of things. First of all, a device's screen width, often referred to as the device's viewport width, is going to determine the responsive design's breakpoints. And these breakpoints that I'm referring to are going to be declared using CSS media queries. The trouble is, as you can see on this web page that I haven't brought up yet, there are a lot of devices on the market. Now, onto this web page. Go ahead and fire up your browser and your notepad and head over to, this is a bit of a tongue twister and a mouthful here, nmsdvid.com. That wasn't too bad, /snippets, and that'll bring you here, okay? Now, as we can see here on this page, we have a huge array of devices. We have desktop devices or resolutions here over on the left-hand side. In the center on this web page, we have our smartphones, and then over on the right-hand side, we have our tablets. And I'm surprised to see some tablets in here that are a little bit more obscure. I thought I was the only one who knew what an Arcos was or even what a Kobe was, but there they are. They're all in here, okay? So lots of great stuff. But again, when we're trying to determine our media query breakpoints, it can be a little bit overwhelming because of the huge array of devices that we have available. So let me try and break this down and make it nice and simple for you. Let's use our desktop or monitor resolutions way over in the left-hand column. And I'm going to start off with 1024. So let's say, for instance, I wanted to build a media query, build a breakpoint in my layout that's going to target a browser width of 1024 pixels. Well, if I go and click on this guy, he actually reveals for me what that media query would look like. And we're going to code these guys in just a short little while, but he would look something like this. So at media screen and then max width, and then in this particular case, 1024, followed by a pair of curly brackets or curly braces. So that's the 1024 breakpoint or media query. We can see the same thing happening for 800 pixel widths, 640 pixel widths, and so on. Okay? Now, things get a little bit more interesting and a little bit more complicated when we start digging into the mobile devices like iPhones, for instance, because of course, an iPhone can be held in either a landscape or a portrait view. So we would have two breakpoints or two media queries if we wanted to support and build a custom theme for both landscape and portrait on the iPhone. All right? And of course, we can keep going here. We could get into the HTC Thunderbolt if we wanted to, some Samsung devices as well, or even into some other iOS devices like iPhone 5, iPhone 4, and so on. And as you can see, some of these media queries start getting much more intricate than what we saw over on the left-hand side. And if you really want to have some fun, you could dig into the devices over in the right-hand column. I'll leave that up to you. Now, up at the top, they have some handy links here. You could just view monitors, you could just view smartphones, or just tablet devices if you wanted to. So the problem here is that, again, I've already said this a few times, there's so many devices available on the market. So how can we determine what breakpoints we should be focusing on for our responsive WordPress theme? Well, let me show you the next web page that I have opened up here inside my web browser. This is a slightly longer URL. If you go to metaltoad.com/blog and then simple device diagram responsive design planning, that'll bring you here. Okay, and by the way, this post is loaded full of great information. I'm just going to scroll down a little bit because what they've done is they've come up with a diagram here to help us determine our breakpoints. I'm just going to click on this diagram here and I'll zoom in on them just a little bit here. You can see above the line here they have portrait, and below the line they have landscape layouts. And there's all of the devices. I shouldn't say all of the devices, but a huge array of devices, starting with older Android phones and small form factor Android devices, iPhones, older Android phones, and again, small form factor Android devices, and so on and so on. Moving up the line here, 480 pixels, 540 pixels, 768 pixels, for the iPad and the iPad 2. Let me scroll horizontally here, and we wind up all the way over towards the desktop devices, higher resolution iPads, and higher resolution Samsung devices. Okay, so a handy graph that they have here, which is great. I'm just going to go back to the original blog post here. Now, again, as I say, you may want to read through this. It's loaded full of great information. But as I scroll down here, they begin recommending 3 different layouts or 3 different breakpoints or versions of your WordPress theme, if you want to think of it like that. They are recommending 0 to 519 pixels, and then a second media query or a second breakpoint that will go 520 to 959, so quite a wide span there in terms of the device width, and then any device over 960 pixels, so your high-resolution tablet devices, your desktop displays, and so on, okay? So I hope you're not feeling too overwhelmed, because this is just one of many, many approaches. If I continue scrolling down, they even suggest one possibility of going with 4 different layouts, and there's the breakpoints that they're recommending here, okay? Or you could go even further and get into 6 layouts, and I'm not going to rhyme through all the different widths that they're specifying here, but it all depends on how far you want to go with this. Now, in my mind, it's way too much to try and control and maintain 6 different layouts, 6 different versions of my WordPress theme. Even 4 is a lot. I try to shoot for 3 myself. But here's the bad news with this post, is it's outdated. It was written way back in March of 2012, so the info is slightly outdated. Thankfully, they've given us a 2015 update, which you can view following this link here up towards the top, which I conveniently have open in the next browser tab. All right, now, again, this is another great blog post if you want to read through this. Lots of great information here. Now, bear in mind that the information that we have here on this blog post is actually driven from Metal Toad's own Google Analytics information, but it's a good starting point for us. What they've done here is they've broken down sort of the same idea that we saw in the previous diagram. Now it's kind of in chart form, so we can see all the different devices and the variety of breakpoints that we have, the variety of devices really that fall under each breakpoint, perhaps said better. So you can take a closer look at this if you want to help you determine what breakpoints you want to go for, okay? So looking at this diagram myself, anyway, here's what I might say to myself. Okay, we have a group of devices at 320 pixels. So, for instance, the Apple iPhone, the Samsung Galaxy S2, and so on, the Apple iPod's in there as well. A group of devices there, and this is the lowest breakpoint, 320, right? So I might go, okay, I'm going to target that. And then maybe what I'll do is I'll move up the line a little bit. Maybe I'll move up the line to the next major breakpoint that I see in this graph anyway, which would be 768. There's the Apple iPad. But what I would do in my layout anyway is I would set up my first media query to be at 320, the second media query or the second breakpoint to be at 768. The 768 breakpoint is going to be for all of the devices between the 320 and the 768, okay? And then I might set another breakpoint for high-resolution devices, 1080, and higher resolution from there. Okay, but again, it's really up to you. You really have to kind of determine how you want to handle this for yourself. It's going to back up here a second. I'm just going to scroll down here because, again, as I said just a moment ago, there's lots of great information in here. You could even use Bootstrap or Foundation if you wanted to as a starting point to determine your breakpoints. And this is nice, fresh information from January 2015. Bootstrap, for example, is using 4 breakpoints. You can read them off there. I'm not going to rhyme through all these numbers here. You can read them there for yourself. Foundation, as an alternative, is using less than 640 and then all the way up to 1,440 pixels on the high end for their breakpoint. Okay? So, in most cases, and I'm going to zero in on this graph up towards the top here. As a matter of fact, I'll go and click on it again to bring it into full screen here. In most cases, we want to target just a few common breakpoints rather than custom tailor our CSS for all imaginable devices. That would be a heck of a lot of work. So you can certainly use the information here on the metaltoad.com blog post that I'm referring to, but again, just a gentle reminder, it's based on their own site's analytics. Now, in the next exercise, I'll discuss the device breakpoints that we'll target in this course as our demonstration example, these breakpoints that we use in this course may not work on the latest versions of browsers and devices, so you may want to choose to use higher breakpoints yourself in your own projects.